All right, good morning, KOTA Territory. Welcome to your KOTA's Political Pulse. I'm Humberto Giles-Sanchez. I'm joined by investigative reporter Blake Troli here this morning to kind of talk politics, to say, right?
Policy today.
Policy.
Today we're talking policy.
Yes.
We've got NRA State Director Brian Gosch in. And Brian, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up becoming the state director here in South Dakota and for a few other states?
Sure. I'm a lawyer by profession, and I served in the South Dakota House for 9 years, including being Speaker of the House and the state House Majority Leader. And shortly after my term ended in the early parts of 2017, I got a call from the NRA asking if I would apply for a job. And since then, I've been the state director for the NRA. I represent the NRA in South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota, Montana, and Wyoming.
And out of all those states, which one would you say is the most gun-friendly?
South Dakota.
Most gun-unfriendly?
Minnesota.
And what are the key differences that you see when you're looking at these two states? And they are fundamental. I mean, politically, they are much different landscapes.
Well, and to go back a little bit, when I first started, I noticed Minnesota actually had a couple of laws that were better than ours in relation to firearms and the Second Amendment. We have adopted those similar type of policies. So now it's a stretch to find something where Minnesota does it better than us when it comes to the Second Amendment. But because of the close nature of the makeup of the bodies over there, the House, currently is 67 Republicans, 67 Democrats. The Senate over there is 34 Democrats and 33 Republicans. There's been some fluctuation due to some, criminal charges being posted and some deaths, but currently that's generally the makeup of that body. It's a different lifestyle over there. It's a different way of thinking. There's a close nature to the politics over there and how they live and then how they pass laws. And so one of the key differences there is it's become very polarizing. You don't find as many moderates as you used to. Each of the parties has pushed out a lot of those folks, and so it's very polarizing in that sense. You see the DFL, the Democrat Farmer Labor Party, they call it, push out anyone they think is too moderate. They primary them, or the Republicans see them as a target for elimination, if you will, in a campaign.
How key do you think it is at this point to get Democratic Party support for gun ownership and the Second Amendment? How does the NRA see that at this point? It's
hugely important, and for Minnesota particularly, it's the only way we can advance Second Amendment right now over there. You have to, or to stop gun control. There's been one particular senator in District 3 who's been a big help in that way. He's a DFL party member. But he hasn't towed the line with the leadership over there on that category.
Are you seeing any fundamental differences right now with Republican representatives and their stance on gun policy?
I think the divide in South Dakota is a little bit different. There seems to be, a small representation for the Democrat Party, and then you've got a divide between so-called conservatives and so-called moderates. And the number of moderates versus the number of conservatives kind of varies, and then it helps set, the policy to some extent on what you can advance in different categories, including the Second Amendment.
And I was just wondering, kind of as your experience being this, what have you seen at least here in the state that maybe should be pushed onto or encouraged in other states?
The stand your ground, the no duty to retreat. Those are things we've been able to advance in states recently, like North Dakota. We've strengthened it in Wyoming. The ability to defend yourself or others, your loved ones, your spouse, your kids, or to be a good Samaritan and help those around you who are being threatened. You should have the ability to do that. Some states encourage you to flee and not help. They require you to retreat and look for an exit and not render assistance to somebody who needs help.
I'm curious what you make of the governor. I mean, this last session, the governor did sign some pro-Second Amendment bills into law. We spoke about those. Some of them are a little bit more complex than others. Can you explain which key bills you think were passed this year in the South Dakota legislature as it pertains to Second Amendment rights?
Well, thanks for that question. Senate Bill 81 was a key piece of legislation that prohibits financial institutions from implementing merchant category codes specific to firearms and ammunition transactions. And so when a customer comes in and buys something, nowadays, if a credit card processing company is going to categorize that purchase, it just falls under a general category of sporting goods, for example. Some states, some institutions wanted a specific category so that they could track and record who's buying a firearm or who's buying ammunition and in what numbers. Currently, the federal government cannot keep a list of all that data, but a private company like a credit card company could do that and then share it with the government of their choosing. And so that bill is going to prevent financial institutions from implementing that specific category code, so they cannot track South Dakota gun owner purchases and ammunition purchases.
Nationally, I know President Trump has, he had ordered AG Bondi to take a look at Biden-era gun policy. And then recently, as earlier this month, the Attorney General said that she announced a task force to look into some of these policies. I would think that based on your previous answer that you find South Dakota to be a pretty gun-friendly state. But nonetheless, what federal laws do you think overarch into a state like South Dakota that you would like to see AG Bondi take a look at and expand those Second Amendment rights?
Sure. Well, one of them would be the Hearing Protection Act that Senator Tom Cotton out of Arkansas brought. That would eliminate firearm suppressors from falling under the National Firearms Act, which require a lot more regulation, cost, a $200 tax stamp, more paperwork, fingerprinting, National Firearm Act trusts in order so you can pass on that suppressor to someone who's 18. Things like that, when this piece of equipment is simply hearing protection. It simply lowers the decibels, 20 to 35, usually below the hearing loss rates. It would be the equivalent of having, hearing protection on, it's like an earmuff or ear pro or something of that nature to save on your hearing loss. There's really no need for it. I think at the time somebody thought, and maybe you've seen in the movies where they act like it actually silences the sound of a firearm, but it just doesn't. If you've ever fired one with a suppressor, without a suppressor, you'll know that it's still very loud. You still have, the bullet, in most cases, breaking the sound barrier. You have different pieces of equipment on the firearm that make noise, the explosion of the gunpowder. And so the suppressor is all about hearing protection. And if you can hunt in a field for pheasants without having to have earplugs in or some type of hearing protection, you'll be able to hear other people in your hunting party better, and it'll be safer to coordinate who's doing what and where. If somebody's getting out ahead, you can, yell to them and have them come back. But if they're wearing ear protection, they might not be able to hear you. And so the suppressors that are available on shotguns work. They're not very heavy, but it saves on hearing loss. That would be one in particular that I'd really like to see the change at the federal level, but it would require a congressional act. There's nothing that I don't think the ATF could do to change that.
Gotcha. I'll let you keep asking.
All right. Well, I know that one of the, I had mentioned that you were coming on the show, and somebody I know who is a CCW holder in California was asking about reciprocity. And I know that there is somewhat of a push right now to have all 50 states recognize CCW permits basically in all 50 states. So if you get a CCW permit, it really doesn't matter which state you get into or which state you get it in, whatever state you're in should recognize that. What has that push been like for the NRA?
We've gotten close a few times, but to pass anything in the U.S. Senate, it's going to take 60 votes to call for cloture. And it's tough to get that. You can't necessarily even hold together the Republican Party on that, on a vote on firearms. And so to get to 60 now would be really difficult, even to pass a bill for hearing protection or to pass a bill for national reciprocity. There are 10 states in the country that do not allow out-of-staters to carry concealed, and they probably never will absent federal action. South Dakota, as you pointed out, allows every state to carry with a concealed carry license in our state, and without a license now with constitutional carry, as long as they're not a prohibited person. That falls under the federal law for people who cannot carry a firearm.
What is the NRA's stance on reciprocity?
We support reciprocity. Currently we have a type of permit that will make you able to legally carry in 40 states, including South Dakota. North Dakota has a similar benefit, but neither South Dakota nor North Dakota will allow you to apply for a concealed carry license if you're from out of state.
When talking about gun regulation, one of the things that I've always been curious about is the NRA's stance on a lot of these different gun measures. Are there any gun measures that get passed that maybe do restrict gun ownership in some form, whether it's that you have a criminal conviction or anything related? Are there key gun control measures that the NRA supports?
Well, we don't support gun control. We don't support gun control measures. We support gun safety, and we have a long history of hunter education and gun safety, proper use of a firearm. Our Eddie the Eagle program for children, what to do if you come across a firearm. Don't touch it, go tell an adult. But our NRA certified instructors that for, well over 100 years have been educating our youth and adults on how to properly handle a firearm and hunt in the field and to enjoy that sport without incident. You will never find a mass shooter who was an NRA member. You won't find many hunting accidents for people who've taken the hunter safety course. It's usually folks who have not taken that course and try to go out there and go in that field without knowing how to properly handle a firearm.
I want to go back to some state policy. One of the things that we talked about as well, and we're going to go backwards here a little bit in the interview, was there was a bill that was signed into law that essentially expanded carrying guns at bars here in South Dakota. And we had talked about this, that, well, I'll let you explain the bill, but that there was some nuance to this bill in the sense that there are already, according to what you were telling me before, that there already really were some categories of bars that people could carry a gun in.
Oh, absolutely. So that was House Bill 1218, and that passed this year. It was kind of a repeal some gun-free zones type bill. And so in addition to the topic that you just discussed, it also allows employees in local government buildings to carry legally and not allow by policy city councils or mayors to restrict that. So currently in South Dakota, there's a concept called preemption, and that is only the state gets to decide what the gun laws are. The purpose of that is similar to having uniform traffic laws across states. So no matter where you travel, you know what the laws are and you know how to comply with those laws. And you don't have to guess or carry around a chart to figure out, well, if I'm in Lenox, what are the rules for carrying guns here versus Wall, South Dakota? You just know what the gun laws are. And so some people who get into politics may not like the Second Amendment, may not like guns, want to implement their own rules regardless of state law, so they look for ways around it. So they can't pass an ordinance restricting guns for their employees, so they adopt a policy. So the first part of that bill said, if you're in county government, city government, or township government, you can't by policy restrict your employees from carrying. So the last part of that bill that dealt with a type of gun-free zone was certain types of eateries and establishments that have more than 50% of their sales from the sale of alcohol. So before this takes effect in July 1, you can already legally carry in all sorts of those types of establishments, including some bars that sell alcohol, of course. And so if you're in a hotel bar, if you're in a casino bar, if you're in a national chain restaurant that has a bar, now those are all places that likely have more than 50% of their sales from other things other than alcohol. So you can already legally carry in those places. But what you can't do in those places legally is be intoxicated and carry a firearm. And so if I'm in a Chili's or an Applebee's or a Granite City, and I have, let's just say, 2 beverages in an hour, generally speaking, you're probably below 0.08. But if you have that third in an hour, you might be above 0.08. So at that point, you're currently illegal if you're carrying. That's current law, that stays in place. You can't be intoxicated and carry a firearm. And so what this bill did was remove a confusing rule of law that said I can carry in some but not others, and I can only know if they report their income to me and what type of income category they're getting their revenue from. No one's going to post that on the front door. And so it's left to the average customer to guess, do I think this establishment has more than 50% of their sales from alcohol? It's a really confusing, unworkable standard that doesn't apply to most states. There's only a few states that have such a standard, and as of July 1st, South Dakota will remove theirs.
And just for me, just for clarification, just because I have seen some comments out there kind of talking about, we're allowing guns in bars and whatnot, it will still be, illegal for you to carry a gun if you're intoxicated.
That's correct. And on top of that, current law is a bartender can't serve alcohol to someone who is obviously intoxicated. Mm-hmm. That will also stay in place.
Gotcha. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, so just so that we're drawing this distinction, what you're saying is that previously, if a bar, if 50% of the business's income or revenue, for the ban to go into effect, that the bar would essentially have to have more than 50% of its revenue from alcohol.
Right.
And that you're saying that's a pretty confusing way to, I guess, enforce this. Right.
It's hard to know. You're left to guess based on, well, how often have you gone to this place? How much food do they actually serve? And then the law doesn't specify, is it per hour? Is it by the day? Is it by the week? Is it by the month? Is it by the year? What if I'm there for a Sunday night football game and it's Vikings versus Packers, and there's more beer drinkers that night than there are food eaters? Then is that at that particular hour, does it become illegal because they have more sales from alcohol at that point? The law doesn't draw that distinction.
I'm curious, even in a state like South Dakota, if you think people culturally are shifting more pro Second Amendment or more against the Second Amendment, how you see it as somebody who's really getting in there and making these, getting into these policy fights.
That's a good question. It's hard to say. I think statewide, I think we've seen more movement toward being positive toward the Second Amendment, but you have pockets as times change and as cities change and demographics change. How a particular city government might feel about the Second Amendment or what they might try to do to fit or comport with how they feel about